Why people used to fear tomatoes. Science called them poison, folklore called them cursed, yet both agreed eat at your own risk. They're bright, juicy, and a staple of salads. Yet for centuries, the tomato was branded a killer. In Europe, even touching one could spark whispers of death. This isn't a food myth. History truly feared the fruit that now crowns your pizza. The tomato arrived in Europe in the early 1500s, brought from the Americas by Spanish explorers. But instead of excitement, suspicion bloomed. Belonging to the nightshade family, which includes deadly belladonna, it looked suspiciously like a poisonous berry. To the untrained eye, it was a plant that could kill as easily as it could feed. Its strange red flesh and glossy skin seemed unnatural. People saw it as an exotic foreign import that didn't belong in European gardens. Early herbals even warned against eating it, claiming it caused fevers, stomach ailments, or worse. The tomato's reputation began in shadow, and for 2 centuries, it stayed there. One reason for the tomato's deadly reputation was sheer coincidence mixed with bad luck. In the 17th and 18th centuries, wealthy Europeans dined on pewter plates, which contained high amounts of lead. Tomatoes, being highly acidic, leached the lead into food. Nobles who ate tomato dishes fell gravely ill, sometimes dying days later. The culprit wasn't the fruit, it was the metal. But common folk connected the dots in the wrong way. To them, the pattern was obvious. Eat tomatoes, get sick. This mistake transformed the tomato into the poison apple and deepened the fear. Botanists also fueled suspicion. Many early plant experts warned that tomatoes contain toxins. While it's true that tomato leaves and stems hold tomatine, a mild alkaloid, misinformation spread that the fruit itself was deadly. Religious overtones crept in too. Some believed tomatoes were cursed, sent from the New World to tempt and punish Europeans. Farmers avoided planting them, fearing they might taint the soil. Even physicians advised patients to avoid the fruit entirely, lumping it in with deadly nightshade, mandrake, and henbane. As these warnings traveled through rural communities, the tomato's image darkened further, transforming it from an exotic curiosity into a symbol of quiet danger. Folklore added another layer of fear. In parts of Europe, tomatoes were linked to witchcraft and were believed to be used in love potions or deadly spells. Their deep red color symbolized blood and danger. Rural stories told of villagers who vanished after eating tomato-laced meals, or couples who fell into madness after tasting them. These weren't true, but in a time when superstition guided many decisions, the stories carried weight. Farmers whispered about devil's fruit, and parents warned children not to touch them. With each tale, tomatoes became less of a food and more of a feared omen. In colonial America, the tomato's reputation didn't improve at first. English settlers brought their European fears with them. In New England, many farmers grew tomatoes only as ornamental plants, never for eating. They were admired for their strange beauty, but not considered food. Newspapers printed warnings about tomato poisoning, often citing cases from Europe as evidence. While some southern and Spanish colonies embraced the tomato earlier due to their culinary traditions, much of America remained skeptical. It wasn't until the early 19th century that public opinion began to shift, and that shift would need a bold, almost theatrical act. Enter Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson of Salem, New Jersey. In 1820, he staged a public demonstration to prove tomatoes weren't deadly. Legend says he stood before a courthouse crowd with a basket of fresh tomatoes and announced he would eat them all. Onlookers gasped, some expecting him to drop dead on the spot. As he bit into the fruit, juice running down his chin, the crowd waited in tense silence. Minutes passed, nothing happened. Johnson simply smiled and kept eating. The stunt made headlines, and though it didn't erase centuries of fear overnight, it planted the first seeds of acceptance. Even after Johnson's stunt, the tomato's journey to mainstream tables was slow. It found early acceptance in immigrant communities, especially Italians, Spaniards, and Portuguese, who already used tomatoes in their traditional dishes. In port cities like New York, tomato sauces and stews began to appear in small restaurants catering to these groups. Gradually, curious locals tasted and discovered they lived to tell the tale. Recipes started popping up in cookbooks, first cautiously, then with enthusiasm. The tomato's association with foreign cuisines actually worked in its favor, making it seem exotic and fashionable among adventurous eaters. Science also played a role in shifting perceptions. As chemistry advanced, researchers learned that tomatoes contained lycopene, vitamins, and minerals, none of which were harmful. Medical journals began to publish articles praising the fruit's nutritional value. Doctors who once warned against tomatoes now recommend them as part of a healthy diet. The discovery that cooking tomatoes increased the body's ability to absorb lycopene made dishes like sauces even more appealing. By the late 1800s, tomatoes were being canned and sold nationwide, transforming them from a feared fruit to a pantry staple. The rise of ketchup sealed the deal. In the late 19th century, companies like Heinz began producing tomato ketchup in glass bottles, marketing it as safe, delicious, and family-friendly. Advertising campaigns painted ketchup as a modern condiment, distancing tomatoes from their deadly past. It became a fixture in American households, on everything from fries to hot dogs. The more people consumed tomatoes in processed forms, the less they feared them. This mass-market embrace erased centuries of suspicion almost entirely, replacing fear with fondness and a craving for more. By the early 20th century, tomatoes had spread far beyond kitchens. Farmers cultivated new varieties, larger, sweeter, more colorful, making them appealing to home gardeners. Seed catalogs boasted improved strains, promising high yields and fewer blemishes. Canning factories expanded, ensuring year-round availability. In just a few generations, the tomato had transformed from a feared curiosity into a cultural icon. Yet, in some remote regions, whispers of old superstitions still lingered, passed down as harmless warnings. The memory of fear hadn't vanished entirely. It had simply been buried beneath layers of culinary delight. Outside Europe and America, the tomato's adoption varied. In parts of Asia and Africa, it arrived through colonial trade routes, sometimes meeting resistance from locals wary of foreign crops. But as global recipes evolved, it became a bridge ingredient, appearing in stews, curries, and salads. In places where spice and acidity were already familiar in cooking, the tomato found a quick welcome. It's fascinating to think that a fruit once feared in the West would be embraced effortlessly in kitchens thousands of miles away. Modern science confirmed what earlier botanists could only guess. The tomato's alkaloids are present mainly in leaves and stems, not the ripe fruit. Researchers also discovered its strong antioxidant properties, linking it to reduced risks of heart disease and certain cancers. These findings didn't just erase old fears, they turned tomatoes into health heroes. What was once considered a poison apple was now celebrated as a nutritional powerhouse. Still, this transformation wasn't simply about science. It was about trust, rebuilt over centuries, one bite at a time. Curiously, The tomato's deadly reputation pops up in modern pop culture. Novels, films, and even cartoons have joked about killer tomatoes, playing on the fruit's odd history. The 1978 cult movie, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, turned the idea into comedy, reminding audiences that, yes, people once really believed in their danger. This playful twist kept the old myth alive, not as a warning, but as a quirky fact to chuckle over at dinner. In a way, the tomato's journey mirrors humanity's relationship with new foods: suspicion, gradual acceptance, then dependence. It's a story about how misinformation can thrive when science lags behind. If not for a few bold individuals and the slow grind of cultural change, we might still be avoiding tomato sauce today. Imagine Italian cuisine without pizza or pasta sauce. Imagine summer without caprese salad. The thought alone makes the centuries-long fear seem even more surreal. Even today, a handful of people avoid tomatoes, not from superstition, but from genuine allergic reactions or dietary sensitivities. In rare cases, people inherit the old family belief that tomatoes are bad luck. These holdouts are living echoes of a fear that once gripped continents. Their stories, though small in number, remind us that food culture isn't just about flavor. It's about memory, and memories can be stubborn. The tomato also became a symbol of cultural resilience. Immigrant families who brought their recipes overseas preserved traditions in the face of skepticism. The aroma of simmering tomato sauce in a new land became a taste of home and a silent challenge to old prejudices. Over time, the dish itself became an ambassador, winning over neighbors and reshaping perceptions. A single fruit managed to carry history, identity, and pride in its flesh. From colonial gardens to modern supermarkets, the tomato's rise was also a triumph of marketing. Farmers learned to present it not as a strange foreign plant, but as a wholesome, family-friendly crop. Bright posters, cookbooks, and recipe cards erased the fruit's dark image. By the mid-20th century, the idea of fearing tomatoes had become almost laughable, a quaint piece of trivia for curious minds. Yet, the original fear wasn't completely irrational. In a world without modern science, people relied on pattern recognition to survive. If eating a certain food preceded illness, it made sense to avoid it, especially if it looked like known poisonous plants. The tragedy was that a delicious, healthy fruit was wrongly condemned for centuries because of environmental factors no one understood at the time. The next time you bite into a slice of pizza or spoon up fresh salsa, remember, this was once an act of bravery. Entire cultures shunned the tomato for generations, until science and courage turned fear into love. History isn't just about kings and wars. Sometimes it's about the journey of a single fruit that changed the way we eat. So, what other everyday foods might hide a story like this, waiting to be told?